All right, we are back.
Listen to that glass clink.
And it's wow. That's
Listen
the
to that glass clink.
Yeah, I
sound
know.
of
It's
alcoholism.
time to get
Sound
liquored
of
up, guys.
alcoholism.
Yeah,
right
sounds
there.
Going
familiar
in.
and comforting.
Jeez.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk TSM on gamers and starring Reggie and Thorin, I guess you could say. So some dramas started recently, and I think most of it really initiate actually before Summoner's Insight. It was already going on before Summoner's Insight. It's just more behind the scenes, but came to light, came out to just really the public on Summoner's Insight when Thorin was addressing that TSM has decided to no longer do interviews with on gamers. And in particular, they were talking about Travis because Travis is, generally the person who does most of the interviews. Has always been really had good relationships with everybody too in the community. So it was an even bigger deal that they were saying no to Travis. And because Travis works for On Gamers, who in turn employs Thorin, and TSM had issues with that, and actually just doesn't. I think Reggie in general came out and said that he just doesn't like the show Summoner's Insight and just what they do there, right? So really, really brought on a lot of discussion. A lot of people putting in their opinions, like Monty and Thorin, and Reggie even addressed it too. Really talking about whether it's professional to really have a team do that sort of thing. Really talking about journalism again, criticism, just a lot of things that we've talked about in the past. But this having to focus on one of the bigger League of Legends team, or one of the biggest League of Legends team, is a much bigger deal. So, all right, where do we start?
We got to start with the social backlash rather that started all of this. This shit was like the top 3 threads last night,
Yep.
like 2,000 comments each. Travis is tweeting from E3. Reggie fucking carves out 20 minutes of his extremely
video,
valuable
sure.
time, I presume, to make this vlog. Monty Cristo's chiming in. Last Shadow comes in out of nowhere, chimes in. Doa's linking fucking YouTube videos. It was just insane. Everyone just got wound up so crazy. It's just fucking nuts. So that's where it starts.
All right, so let's talk about the impact of just not doing interviews with on gamers, right? From the standpoint of on gamers, how big of a hit is that, not being able to do TSM interviews?
What, like to on gamers?
Yeah.
Now here's the thing. For me, look, I try to explain this. There's no, right, and I don't want to repeat, parts of the editorial because I think that's spurious, and that certainly is a waste of everyone's time here. But right, okay. The reality is, speaking as someone who's been on a blacklist or two, you actually don't lose anything, and I'll tell you why. You can still create content about that team. And if people are interested in that team, I don't care what anyone says, they are not going to boycott the content. They're not. If anything, the worst thing you can do is surrender the control. Because once you say to a media outlet, I am no longer going to work with you, regardless of what it is you're writing, you've completely liberated them. There is now no fucking quid pro quo arrangements to be made. There is no negotiation. There is no, please can you not write about that sex scandal? And if you fucking don't, in return, we're signing a Korean next week, and I'll give you an exclusive interview with them. That dialogue dies.
Yep.
It's not happening. So now I get to maybe break the embargo news that they're signing the Korean, write about the sex scandal, and then I get to write an editorial about why the Korean's going to be a bad move. And there's no reprisals. There's none. And you know what? That traffic's going to be through the fucking roof.
Right.
Because people pretend in esports that they despise and loathe opinions and the people who have them and the people who are willing to articulate them, but they cannot get enough of them. Absolutely not. It's the Howard Stern effect en masse. So ultimately, if the organization has got the balls to try and not the organization, but the press organization has got the balls to try and not play back, if we don't write about them for 3 weeks, they might forget that we're having such a childish argument, and then we'll get interviews again. If they don't do that, actually, on the basis of being free from those dialogues, you can actually put out better quality of stuff. So to give you a recent example, I'm pretty sure a lot of people noticed that when Odie, the manager of Team Dignitas, was on Twitch and was calling people, fucking Korean cunts and
A little
whatnot.
crazy there, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I'm not even gonna go into the ins and outs of the statement or what was intended behind them. I think it's definitely wrong to categorize him as a racist because I know the man, and some people did that. But what was interesting, I thought, was that not one person, myself included, in the mainstream press, could really write that story. Now, the mainstream esports press, I should say. So why is that? Why can't we touch that story? Well, I'm sure people have seen a Team Dignitas shirt. They've got a lot of badges and fucking logos on there. Now, what do you think that means? Well, we're the lowest common denominator in esports journalism. It's the most undervalued thing. Content is a lost leader, and anyone who tells you differently is a fucking liar, right? So to produce good content, you've got to get in a bed with businesses, sponsors. People have to actively support the work. And like, for example, how a business like Heaven Media works is we make money in other areas so we can sink money, just throw it into the bottomless pit that is let Richard write an editorial because they believe in some profound greater good being born out of it. The traffic doesn't touch the sides. It's bigger than it ever has been, but it doesn't touch the sides. Now, if, say, for example, the organization Team Dignitas has 12 sponsors, and one of those sponsors is running an ad campaign on my website, then there's going to be some awkward phone calls, right, about why we all can't pull in the same direction and get along. And I'm not saying Odie wants to have those awkward phone calls, and I certainly don't, but money men are pulling the strings. Sorry to burst everyone's fucking bubble. So where does that put us in relation to this? Well, organizations are starting to get this pull, this leeway because of who support them and the traffic they generate, and they're starting to try and exert the same influence on press outlets about what you can and can't say, who you can and can't interview. And I've got to be honest, I think it's their right. They're perfectly entitled to withdraw, but I would say it's hugely disrespectful to the press, it's hugely disrespectful to the esports landscape, it's hugely disrespectful to the fans. And ultimately, I wouldn't want to support somebody that isn't going to advocate the right to freedom of speech, to criticize to have the right to criticize an organization based on what's happening around them.
Okay, Cody?
So I've been on both ends of the spectrum. I think the way this is going to get framed, and we talked about this a little in private, so I'm going to put you on the spot to make sure that you don't get off the hook, Chris. I think you're closer to Reggie's side than any of us, and Richard's on the opposite side.
Devil's advocate more than anything else.
Okay,
yeah, sure.
Closer to Reggie's side, what? Because he can relate because of race?
No, just like Thor
and Cody. What the fuck?
Wowzers.
That's exactly the reason.
I'm blacklisted now too, man. I can't talk to TSM now.
There you go, done.
I'm closer in the middle. I've been blacklisted before as a journalist. I've blacklisted before as an EG employee. Me and old Dick Lewis over here on my side used to not be
how we
the
actually
closest.
met, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
It's
he's
our
called
eyes met across a blacklist. It was beautiful.
Exactly.
Cody's cockblocked me a couple times too.
I've yes. Oh yes. And it's a great and wonderful experience. So so I read Richard's editorial, and I think one of the most so I guess the way I would sum up my opinion is I think in this particular situation, everybody is a loser. I think that On Gamers loses from those hits, which are the bread and butter and cornerstone of their business. I think that in the long run, it's very difficult for someone like Reggie to sort of like quantify how something abstract like, like, I don't know, Travis's shit probably gets seen by on the low mark, like 50,000 people every time he puts a video up. How much influence that has, right? Where his sponsors' logos are being seen on a jersey. I don't think it's a ton. I don't think, in his quarterly reports, Reggie is letting whoever his sponsors are now know how many times they were interviewed by On Gamers, but I mean, like, every little bit matters. So I'm closely in the middle. I think this is a situation where everyone loses. I think the posturing's really funny. So this is where I defer from like my position is very political, but I also think it's really fucking funny. I just think it is, man. On Gamers couldn't interview EG a little while ago. Every time there's a Summoner's Insight, there seems to be like a new issue. Someone's calling somebody a cunt. Someone's not allowed to interview anyone anymore. It's just absolutely wild. I don't know. I don't think. I think when Reggie was like, "Listen, guys, we're not going to fucking talk to On Gamers anymore," his like balls swelled a little bit, and his like he felt like a real man, because that's like that's a really, you got to put your stake in the ground. But I think y'all end up looking like fucking weenies at the end of the day. Everyone's tweeting feverishly. Rod's like, well, I really support my friends. It's just like it's such a joke. It's just such a goddamn joke.
I think
what do you think about? So what do you think about Reggie targeting the organization that more so than the individual when it comes to blocking that out?
Look, there's numerous precedents for this, but in real sports, not so much in esports. But what I would always say is that the people that control the league control the sports product, which is ultimately what all sports are. It's a function of marketing. It's the end result. It's designed to make people money based on enjoyment. That's pretty much what it all is. If you break it down to its bare essence, they control that. Well, look, you can't just fucking blacklist whoever you want, and one of you motherfuckers is going to have to do an interview. It's as simple as that. For example, over here we have obviously Manchester United, the dominant football team for 2 decades. Unprecedented success in the English league. The BBC ran a documentary that showed that Alex Ferguson's son had ties to a dodgy football agent and had potentially took what we affectionately call bungs, which is where you get money to facilitate the signing of a player from one team to another. On the basis of that, Alex Ferguson, who was the manager of Manchester United, said, "I will never do an interview again with the BBC." And he didn't do an interview with them or appear on Match of the Day, the official league sponsor for the match highlights, for 7 years. But he was fined for doing that.
Yeah.
And the assistant manager still had to do interviews, and the players still had to do interviews. So I think if you care about growing a sport and growing a product, Riot could just as easily come down on this. I don't know if Riot can even do that at this moment, because we've all seen the NALCS viewing figures, and we all know they go up by 100K when TSM are playing.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's a factor. But I think absolutely when you get into this sort of territory, right? TSM are on top now, and this is what always makes me laugh when these organizations flex their muscles, because I've seen it. I have seen it. I was boycotted by an organization. This is going way back. An organization called Power Gaming. If anyone remembers them, they think they made inroads with Halo and blah, 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 blah. And anyway, I think one of the staff at the website, my boss actually at the time, wrote an article or something that they didn't like, or they showed preferential treatment to another organization or some bullshit. So they said, then we're never going to work with you again. Then the organization started, it lost the sponsor or two, and all of a sudden they needed publicity. So they had like some fucking relaunch party or whatever, and guess who was the fucking guest of honor? The journalist of honor. Free drinks, Richard. Whatever we've got to do to get you there.
Yeah,
okay, we're playing nice now, are we? Right. Okay, you need something.
Yeah,
and this is the thing. What I find most persistently in the relationship between organizations and press is we on the press side always end up forgiving, because at the end of the day it's business. It's not personal. But I honestly think that a lot of these organization owners have a very hard time for all of their big talk about professionalism and business actually disseminating emotions from smart business decisions.
Right.
And TSM might be bigger than On Gamers right now, might be bigger than Riot. They can do what they want right now. But how long before that changes? Right. What happens in the future when it does change and all of a sudden they've got a sponsor who's like, well, actually, you don't talk to a major press outlet. And when we talk about On Gamers, let's be clear what we're talking about here. In League of Legends coverage, they're pretty much unparalleled, aren't they? They're pretty much untouched. They've got the resources, they've got the frequency, they've got the quality, that right now nobody else matches them on all three at any given time. You know, you might read a better article somewhere else. You might see a better interview somewhere else. Do you see 3 interviews straight after an LCS game up on Reddit on the front page? Bam, that day, all super high quality. No, you don't. So I think it's a foolish move. It's a clash of egos, and it doesn't serve the fans. It doesn't serve the sponsors of TSM. I'd argue it doesn't serve the players of TSM who, you know, maybe might want to have careers beyond that organization, and they need to remain marketable and relevant. Right. And it certainly doesn't help on gamers at all. So I fail to see who really wins here ultimately, besides the classic esports pissing contest of egos.
Yep. You made 2 fantastic points. I'm sorry, I got to interject.
Yep,
I think the comments about egos are extremely important. One of the as On Gamer sort of day by day finds itself, one of the things that I found is really interesting is On Gamers is as important an esports organization as a league or a team. I mean, like, think about it. Let's just put it in the context of this show. How many conversations have we had about this website? You know what I mean? Like, they're supposed to be reporting on the news, but it's so frequent that they are in the news. I think that's really interesting. And it isn't... I think one of the reasons why this has become such a hotly contested issue right now is that On Gamers is... it's not an issue about press access as much as it is, I think, just... it's a pissing contest between these 2 esports organizations. It's a fight between On Gamers and TSM. It's not a fight between the press and TSM, I think, right now.
Yeah, it's turning into that discussion, unfortunately.
And there was
it's interesting because we've actually just got some breaking news coming through that On Gamers have issued an apology. But I think we should just I think we should just go and talk about all of the shit we were going to anyway.
Yeah, let's exactly. Steven, what are your thoughts on all this?
I have no fucking idea. I haven't kept up with this shit at all. Something. It's bad for them to not talk to journalists, I guess. I mean, what's the devil's advocate for the other side here? It doesn't seem like this is a very big two-way.
Yeah, this is where you come in, Channy.
Well, I mean, devil's advocate is just like, okay, so the big thing about Reggie is that, he did say that he didn't say he wasn't going to give interviews to press. He just said he wasn't going to give interviews to On Gamers. And, Richard, you've definitely or done a good job of explaining On Gamers' role as the main journalistic source for all League of Legends, news and
what's the defense for Reggie? It just seems like a shitty point on his part, just an ego thing. What's the defense for them saying, "Oh, I don't want to give interviews to On Gamers"? What's the legitimate defense?
The legitimate defense is, when it comes down to it, he can do whatever he wants, right? And saying, no. Here, but what I'm saying is that, saying that you're not going to do any kind of interviews with anybody is a lot different than just saying you're not going to do it with one organization. You know what I mean? And what if Richard, Reggie came up to you and said, "Hey, I'm just going to exclusively do interviews with you"?
I don't know how. I honestly don't know. I mean, a lot of people have made intimations that what I should do is reach out. I mean, first of all, I think Reggie wouldn't be open to that anyway.
Yeah,
I've categorized him as a bully in the past, and it's a categorization I absolutely stand by. And I've done it predicated on evidence. So that old chestnut. But I don't know how comfortable I would feel as a journalist promoting an organization that feels content to blacklist journalists. There's a much bigger principle at stake. So yes, On Gamers' loss could indeed be another press association's gain, but it certainly wouldn't be mine. If, however, he wanted to clarify points, or if he read my editorial today and wanted a right to reply, I'd absolutely extend that to him, because if I censored him and prevented him from doing that, that would make me a massive hypocrite for obvious reasons. So, I mean, for me, I think, look, it's like I said right at the start of the debate. Reginald's got the right to interact with whoever he wants to, but it is such a PR disaster to effectively, okay, these guys have said some things I don't like, and let's look at his reasons. His reasons were these grandiose, overarching kind of things that aren't real. They're not real. He said he didn't see what positivity Summoning Insight brought to the scene, and therefore he didn't want to support an organization that would publish such content. So, first of all, Summoning Insight fills an absolutely vital niche in the League of Legends landscape. Absolutely. It's a free-form debate about teams, players. It invites players to come on and interact. It can be stupid sometimes, absolutely. It can go too far sometimes. But as I said in my editorial, I think that's all part of its crooked charm. That, you know, you're not all, when you sit down and watch the episode, you know you're not going to agree with everything that's said on it. But why does there need to be this consistent consensus? I'm a grown-up. I can handle, different opinions.
Sure, I mean, Reggie obviously doesn't like the show. I mean, I can.
Okay, so if he doesn't like the show, I think that's fine. But to then try and justify this, like it's an altruistic deed, like for the good of the scene. I am not going to work with this publication because I do not feel Summoning Insight brings anything to the table, which A, is patently untrue in the sense that it brings plenty to the table, and B, it's patently untrue that is his reasons. TSM have come in for a lot of flack on the show. That's his reasoning. And maybe you agree and believe that is reason enough. I always say that when you do anything, you're going to come into criticism for it, and that's just across the board. Be you an athlete, a politician, a journalist, whatever you do, you're going to get people going to be out there and they're going to have an opinion, and that opinion is fair comment, no matter how much it pisses you off or how much it makes you upset, or you can't stand to log on to the onto Twitter that day because you know what you're going to read, and it's a feeling I know all too well. Yet I have never attempted to censor a publication having a view about me, because it's obviously something they're entitled to do. And if that publication who were writing information about me reached out to me, yeah, I'd do the interview. I'd sit down. I'd go into the lion's den. Mm-hmm. There's a reason why liberals continually appear on Fox News, even though they know it's bullshit. You've got to take the moral high ground. You've got to try and win over that audience that is getting one channel of information that you disagree with. And you've got a responsibility to yourself, to the broader community at large, to engage and try and subvert that opinion without just completely withdrawing from the process.
Yeah, I mean, the one interesting about in Reggie's video too is that when he was talking about Travis and just kind of talking about when Travis was getting going initially, and he let Travis post stuff on their site and that sort of bit. He definitely went into this kind of tone that was, we alluded to it a little bit earlier, just that, they have nothing to gain from doing these interviews, right? And we were talking a little bit about that already. But he obviously feels like that. I mean, he thinks that this is kind of like charity, right? I mean, taking the time out, what he's been doing, what he's done so far, having the players take time out and do these interviews, and they've done it up to this point.
No sports person wants to do an interview after a game. And again, the point I made in the editorial is the idea that we're like some fucking ravenous bottom feeders, like we just follow players around, like what Cantona said, where the seagull follows the trawler because it thinks a sardine will be thrown to it. Well, I respect people's distance. I've gone to events and I try to interview teams and players who I won't name, and they say, "Oh, get me after this game," and then they lose that game, and then it's like, "Oh, I'm too depressed to do the interview," and they've just wasted a bunch of my time I could have been interviewing somebody else, time I could have been producing another piece of content, but I've hung around and took them at their word, and I don't get what I need to do my job right now. That's fine. I would never call anybody out for that. I respect your right at any given time to withdraw an interview. But players and organizations mess journalists around on a fundamental level, like all the time. We are pretty much beholden to them. You've got to get, a lot of the time, even if you want to, if you go to a big event now, to even get in, a press pass is no good anymore. You need a VIP pass. That you only want to mingle with the elite of the elite, the best of the best. So I have to then strong arm someone in the press office, like, give me a VIP pass, just so I can go and ask somebody for an interview that they may or may not do. Now, how is the power skewed towards journalists in this scenario? It absolutely isn't. And it would be a complete fallacy to say that it was. Equally, the idea that what they're doing is some, again, altruistic, charitable deed. Why does anybody do anything with the press? We do it because publicity, expectations, an obligation to the fans. These are concepts, these are ideas that far eclipse your personal feelings. And you should be a big enough person to put that to one side. I mean, let's say, okay, if there's just one fan out there whose entire source of interviews is on Gamers. That's the only site he uses for that. And he's a TSM fan as well. Why would you penalize that guy? It makes no sense. He's a loyal fan.
It's for the one up you. I can guarantee.
Yeah, of course it is. But
I've been in that position. I think On Gamers is in a very lucky position right now because the way they have consolidated a lot of what could be called premier talent contributes to their site exclusively. Like I said, I think this is I think no one wins from this. I think no one walks away with their foe's blood on their hand, like really feeling good about themselves.
Okay, so
I think
here's a counter look at this, Cody. So what if TSM decided to go to Daily Dot and only do content there? Then doesn't Daily Dot gain from this?
Yes, but no. I mean, like it's also.
I mean, isn't it good to have multiple journalistic organizations?
Yes, I think certainly it is. Travis has kind of a monopoly, I think, on the North American LCS. Like, Travis is Travis. Who else do you go to? You don't go to anyone.
Yeah, and he's built up, over years. He's built up those relationships.
Yeah, and I'm not saying it was undeserved.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's actually what a lot of the crux of the issue was, is Reginald, for better or worse, was upset at some of the stuff that was going on at Summoner's Insight. But I'd also like to point out that I heard we were having access issues with TSM while I was still working there, which was February at the latest. So this isn't like a new thing. This was, they didn't figure this out this weekend. This is like, it's something that's been going on. And I think the issue became, well, Travis is this beloved, charming, sunglasses wearing individual, and like he brings us, the commoners of League of Legends, the interviews that we want. And I think it became an issue. It was Reggie's upset at Thorin, so it transfers over to On Gamers. This is the easiest way for Reggie to strike, right? That was the chin that was closest to him, right? So that's who he throws the punch at. He just punches On Gamers. But as part of collateral damage, Travis is affected, and then Travis is Travis's fans, I don't know, pick up their picket signs and just start hitting on TSM. Like, it's just such a shitty quagmire. I feel like this is where maybe it was lost on me, and Richard's done a pretty good job of explaining to me today, and he's been really entrenched in his position. It's like, I don't think it's like a powers that be versus the press thing, like, because I feel like On Gamers is part of the powers that be. Like, it's a very political, it's a very now public political thing between two esports organizations.
It's not even organizations. It's a personal thing between, I think, a particular person. In this case, it's Thorin and Reggie. The way to shut Thorin up is to like get your boss to be, like, to affect the organization he works for and get your boss to shut you up.
I imagine how all the people that are praising TSM, for the stance they took, I wonder how they would feel if it was an organization, I don't know, for example, that had been caught out doing something financially inappropriate or not paying players, and they then turn around and threaten to, or did blacklist On Gamers or another news website. I wonder how we'd feel about that. The point is that the channel of the press are the channel of communication. They've got an incredibly vital role to be acting in the public interest. And this is another point that seems to have gone way over a lot of people's heads. If you ask me, just on a basic level, forget the fact that I'm a fucking esports journalist and I'm biased as fuck or whatever. Right? Forget that. Okay, so on the one hand, you've got a company that its interests are business related. On the other, you have a journalistic organization who, even if they were the worst, shoddiest journalistic organization in the world, and I do not think On Gamers adhere to that low standard at all, but if they were, like Daily Mail type standard, there is still an element of what they do that is in the public interest that will always be used to justify what they do. That is effectively the core element of why any journalist would put pen to paper about anything, any issue. There has to be that degree of public interest. Now, if you ask me, whose side would I be falling on? Whose opinion would I trust to be objective? The person with the business interests, or the person that are there to act as in the public interest? The answer should be glaringly obvious, and I find it incredible that the situation that's arisen. I understand it on a personal level. Yes, you may not want to talk to someone that says things you don't like, but journalism is like, that's your personal level, and then you've got this like sort of meta level, this professional level where personal feelings aren't necessarily to get into it. Dude, and even if they did, it's not like the channels of communication aren't open. Reginald got angry that the story got out. He even said that. He tweeted that. He told them privately, we're not going to do any more interviews with you, and expected that to be the end of the issue. Why didn't he go to them first and privately say, look, man, I'm really taking umbrage with some of the things that you're saying. It's making me not want to sanction my place to do interview with you. Is there any chance you could tone it down, please? And if that conversation occurs and they agree, what's the problem?
Is Thorin going to tone it down?
Well, here's the thing, like,
he's just issued a fucking 5-paragraph apology.
Exactly. Whoever's pulling Thorin's reins right now made Thorin apologize.
Oh my
gosh.
Okay,
those behind the wheel certainly are willing to do that, and so that's the one thing. I think there are proper channels to do it. I don't know Reggie personally. Much to the chagrin of my wife and my bank account, I opted out of like diving into the LoL scene a couple of years ago. So I only ever get involved when it's like bigger political issues like this. Like, I just think everyone comes out looking weak. On gamers, like I think it was good that they issued an apology. I think one of Thorne's biggest mistakes was presuming that fans of esports would understand a pop culture illusion from something that didn't take place in like the last 5 years.
People don't even understand the fucking chronology of what they're debating. I think that's the thing I find most upsetting. That, okay, the chronology is that Reginald had already said that, they were going to withdraw, and then Summoning Insight happened, and then the comments about Caesar happened. So the idea that anyone who says Reginald is right to withdraw TSM doing interviews with On-Gamers because Thorin said something racist, you're wrong on 2 counts. Because not only have you got the ridiculous assertion about racism there, but you've also got your fucking chronology fucked up. And this is what I